Okay, so I ask you to think about the end of the book, Mark Middleburg's book. He says, okay, you've got friends that throw things at you all the time about, I don't know if there's a God, I don't know if we can trust the Bible. Hey, what about evil and suffering and all these things that get thrown at us? He said, why don't we throw some things back at them and ask questions of them? So that's why I thought we could talk about it. It's in the book, it's in the last section of the book. So I'm curious, if you're dealing with somebody that says, I don't think there's a God, are there some questions you might throw to them and make them think? It's like putting a pebble in their shoe. Anything that comes to mind? I've got a list of about 4 or 5 that were in the textbook, but you may even think of things that weren't in the textbook. That's fine. What questions could you ask somebody to get them to think about the possibility of there being a God? Yeah, how'd the universe begin? Esther's got a great question. How'd the universe begin? What's the current understanding? Big Bang. Well, how do you get all matter and space and time and energy to come into existence? Whatever caused that has to be outside of the universe to get it going, because the universe can't create itself. So you're dealing with something that's supernatural. That sounds like God. So yeah, that's a great question. What else could you ask? So you're talking to your friend and you say, so how do you think the universe came about? What's another good question?
How did life begin?
Yeah, how did life begin?
Yeah.
You've seen some of I hope you've seen some of those videos. I've sent out links in the past. I'd be glad to do it again if you want to email me. But there are all these wonderful videos of what's going on the cellular level. Even the simplest cell, if they say, well, somehow a cell just kind of came about and, early Earth, there it is. But even the simplest cell is so complicated. It's like a little factory. How do you get a factory to come into existence? Somebody's got to construct the factory. So yeah, how do you get life? What else?
How about open-ended, like, why do you believe that, or what do you believe?
Yeah, that's the Kokel approach. Greg Kokel, Stand to Reason. He says 2 good questions are to say, what do you mean by that? In case, if they say, I believe in evolution, you can say, what do you mean by evolution? But the key question is, why do you believe that? Exactly right. Let me share some of the ones that were in the book here, and you've already covered a lot of them. How the universe started. Where do we get this fine-tuning? Remember, we've talked about that before. Middleburg talked about that there appears to be the exact right rules and laws of nature. They have to be exactly right. You can't have the universe expand any faster. You can't have it expand any slower. You can't have inside the cell, you can't have atoms of a different attraction. I mean, everything has to be exactly right. Everything. Fine-tuning, right? It's like a whole bunch of dials on a wall, hundreds of these dials, and each one has to be set exactly right. Gravity has to be a certain pull. Any more, you don't get life. Any less, you don't get life. So that's a great question. You got fine-tuning going on. Now, how did life arise? We already talked about that. Michael brought that one up. Here's one that he talked about. This is a really good question. How does stuff that doesn't think, like a rock, how does it all of a sudden wake up one day and go, hey, right? Where does that consciousness come from, the self-awareness? Well, how do you get that from stuff that's not aware at all? It's just the stuff of the universe. Hydrogen and helium and carbon and all this kind of stuff. And you throw it together and you shake it really hard and somebody's going to say, hey, stop that. Right? How's that going to work? Where does information come from? Where do you see information inside people? DNA. Right? There's a great argument right there. DNA, just 3 little letters. Memorize those. DNA. That's information. It's not randomness. It's information. It tells how to build proteins. And you've got little readers that go along the DNA strip, and they read that information. They go, okay, so we need this, put that together. It folds itself. Ta-da, you got a protein, and you got a little shuttle that sends the protein off to where it's necessary. Again, go online, just YouTube it. Then just type in, DNA, the splitting of DNA, the replication, messenger RNA, I mean, all that stuff is just fascinating. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but there's some questions that we can at least begin to ask people who say, I'm not sure there's a God. right? So we can ask them some questions. Yeah.
Do you ever ask, like, where does love come from? Where do your feelings come from?
Yeah, that works too. Yeah, exactly. Because now you're talking about a soul.
Right.
Right? Where do we get, if you're a materialist, meaning you don't think there's anything inside of us except just blood vessels and things like that, where do we get a sense of beauty? Right? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter for materialists at all to talk about beauty, because all they're going to say is if you see a beautiful sunset, they're just going to say wavelength of the light is different because it's going through more of the atmosphere. Well, that's not what we say. We look at a sunset, we say, that's beautiful. Or you go to Yosemite and you see a waterfall and you say, that's beautiful. But they're going to say, well, there's a glacier that came through years ago and made the water fall into this pit that was dug out by the glacier. Really? That's not why people go to Yosemite. I mean, that'd be maybe indirect, but they're going to say that's beautiful. Or to see a baby, or to listen to great music. Right? Why does that stir us? We can hear a song from our past, brings tears to our eyes. We can listen to, I just read a book on Handel's Messiah.
Oh, I love that.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, we got to wait a little bit. Originally, it was written for Easter.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's been associated with Christmas. I get a chill when I see these flash, what do we call them, like flash mobs, but they're not a mob. They just show up at a shopping center and they break into Handel's Messiah. And you watch people, they're going like this, and they go, right, and they turn toward it. I was watching a concert on TV one time, and the conductor he had this lush, big orchestra, and he was doing Amazing Grace, and it was in Germany. So here are all these Germans. I mean, I bet 99.9% didn't even darken a church ever. And they did close-ups of the camera going around looking at these people. They had big tears coming down.
Wow.
It was touching something inside of them. But you're right. I mean, where does that come from? It doesn't come from a materialist universe. You're right. What's the source of morality? That's a great question. Is it just a case of it's randomness? There's no such thing as morality. Just bad stuff happens to some people. Good things happen to other people. Really? But we really think there is a good and a bad out there, don't we? We reward, we honor some people. We get angry at other people for what they've done. But if the material universe is all there is, then it's just their neurons firing in an odd way, or they got bad chemicals in their brain. So why get mad at Hitler? He just had different chemicals than Mother Teresa. Man, that doesn't make any sense either. Okay, so let's keep moving. So here was another area. Steve covered this. This is the night that I was home hacking my lungs out on evolution. What would be some questions that you can ask somebody as far as they say, hey, I believe in evolution, and you say,
What do you mean by that?
what do you mean by that? Oh, good, you guys are picking up on the cocoa material there. Yeah, because there's different ways to define evolution. Do they mean from the one cell to us? If they mean that, then we got a problem, right? There's a way to begin arguing about it. If they just mean change over time, no big deal. Darwin was looking at these finches. They talked about Darwin's finches, and the finch beak changed, but it changed back depending on how much food availability there was. The finch didn't turn into anything else, so I mean, you still had a finch. So yeah, that's good. So what's another question that you can ask?
What happened to all the missing fossils? There's not a complete change.
Yeah. We're supposed to have a tree of life, aren't we? That's what we've been told. You ever see those pictures in the biology books? You got the trunk, you got things spreading out here, spreading out there. You know what's really insidious about that tree? Look at the human, sometime go find it, you can see it online still. The Darwinian idea of the tree of life for humans. And guess what you get? Up at the very top, you get Anglo-Saxons. You get white people. Guess what you get on the lower levels, right? Chinese or Africans or whatever. I mean, that thing was really racist. But they created this thing because it looks good, it's the tree. Now they're thinking more grass, not a tree, that animals just kind of all come into existence all over the place. Not coming off of one-celled creature. Yeah. That's a great question to ask. By the way, I think it's up here on one of the slides. You guys heard of the Cambrian explosion? A whole bunch of new animal forms came into existence in just a snap of a finger. And it doesn't allow for, like what you're talking about, Jan, for gradual changes. You don't find those kind of gradual. You get these huge changes, but you don't get the gradual changes. And we're back to that question again. How do you get life in the first place? And this is what Jan's talking about. The fossil record doesn't work very well. See, 150 years ago, people said with Darwin, they said, well, don't worry, we'll just dig up enough fossils and we'll start filling it in, right? We'll get to all those fossil records and you'll see one thing turning into another. They haven't found that. It hasn't worked out that way. Very incomplete. There's another DNA question here, dealing with evolution. How do you shake up material and get information? How do you get code? Doesn't happen. How about the Bible? Some people will complain that there are contradictions or that the Bible's been changed over the years. You can't trust it. It's an old document, has old-fashioned ideas. What are some questions we can turn around?
Have you read it?
Really? That's exactly right. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of biblical illiteracy these days, aren't we? I mean, it used to be, I think about in the 1800s, a guy named Herman Melville, he wrote a book called Moby Dick. Maybe you've heard of that famous whaling story. His first 3 words, call me Ishmael. Right? So that means something to most of us here, doesn't it? But, I mean, I teach kids out of Palomar, and so we throw stuff around once in a while, and I'll throw out a biblical idea, and they stare at me just blank-faced. They don't know Abraham, they don't know David, they don't know any of these, much less Ishmael. So sometimes I have to work at it to show them, you know, what's the importance of that. Okay, it takes a while. But I mean, people don't know the Bible at all. Exactly right, Ted. Here's a good question. Really? There are contradictions? Could you show me some? Guess how fast that conversation ends. Right? They're done. They don't know any. They really don't. We don't have to be afraid of questions coming at us, because oftentimes what they're doing is parroting what they're hearing out there. Right? They haven't really thought it through. Yeah, and then here's Ted's question. Have you ever read the Bible? Guess what they're going to say? Parts? By the way, if you're interested, what I did, and you could pass this along to a friend of yours, I took about a quarter of the Bible and I wrote the story of what the Bible says, starting in Genesis and kind of moving through to the New Testament, and I gave references to places that they could look it up in the Bible itself. So if you got a friend that says, gee, I'd like to read the Bible, and they get around Leviticus and they quit. And you know why?
Yeah.
I got to wear what? What's all this garment stuff and milk from a, whatever. So they're probably going to die a horrible death at that point. But so I skip parts of the Bible. But I say, here's one gospel to read. Here's the one good book of Paul's and what he's trying to do. So if you're interested, it's just 2 pages long. But if they do that, then it tells them the story as well as where to go in the Bible to find it. So rather than just giving people a Bible reading plan, I give them the story. So if you're interested, either remind me, I'll just send it along with the email to everybody, or if I don't do that, just say, hey, where's that 2-page handout? So I'll be glad to send it. And it's non-threatening because it's not written for Christians. Okay, so it just says, this is what the Bible says, this is the story, not, you need to believe it, you need to get saved, go to church, get baptized. I don't do that because I'm sharing it with my class at school and other places. So
That'd be great if you send that.
okay, I'll try to do that. Steve covered some of these really well. Remember when he was doing the hand? You were here for that? Pinky is prophecy, right? Mm-hmm. The prophecies in the Bible are so amazing. Anybody have one favorite prophecy? You'd say, wow, how would you explain that? Hundreds of years before the event. The what?
Isaiah 53.
Isaiah 53 is so good. I think I told you all this before, but a person who was a Jew, but he's a Messianic Jew, talked to Jews on the street in Jerusalem, and he shared that passage, but he didn't tell them where it was from. And he said, who do you think this is? And he said, that's Jesus. He said, it's in your Bible. 700 years before Jesus. They're going, what? Yeah, that's really powerful. Any other passage people like here? Alan?
Well, the one in Daniel where Nebuchadnezzar's defeated by Cyrus because they divert the river. Cyrus gets in and they hand him a letter 200 years before
With his name?
with his name and how he comes into the city.
Yeah. Hello, Cyrus. What? I thought you were going to say in Daniel, he says how long it'll be, how many years before the Messiah comes. Have you ever had somebody actually sit down and crunch numbers? It works out to the time of Jesus. In fact, there are some Jewish scholars after this event, after Jesus was here, let's say in the 100, 200, 300 AD, they said, don't read Daniel anymore because that time has come and the Messiah wasn't here. Isn't that sad? They missed him. And they knew that that was the time period given over, according to Daniel, for the coming of the Messiah. How about the unity? That was something else that Steve talked about, the unity of the Bible. I mean, you think about it. How do you get 66 books to come together, written over different time periods, written in different areas of the world, written by different people on different social levels, and it all tells the same story. It tells one big, monstrous, wonderful story. You can't get two authors to get together and create a single story. It works very well. And then, how do you get its history so right? They keep finding more things, don't they? They found stones now that talk about the house of David. By the way, did you notice there's a series now coming on Netflix, Amazon, right? I think it's Amazon. It's called The House of David. You starting to watch it? Is it accurate to Bible? No. But at least it gets, some. So don't go into it going, wait a minute. Where does it say that? No?
The guy that made the movies, Ben Hinn, and one of the things that he's tried to do is show where David was in all these phases of his life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you think he was cocky and brave when he walked out to kill Goliath, you might want to think again. And the other part is, you're the king of a nation. You got a kid walking up to you telling you, I'll take on that guy that's going to decide the fate of our nation forever.
Yeah.
And how did he convince that king to let him do that?
Yeah.
So there's interesting aspects of the movie that, even if not completely accurate, are going to
Yeah,
wake
the
you up to
feeling.
new ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it does, you encounter Samuel, for example, and so anyway, it's really interesting, but it's out there right now. But you've got references to people in Canaan telling the Egyptian Pharaoh, we need help, we're being invaded. And this is the time period of the Jews going into the land, which is pretty cool, huh? So, and did you know there are, let's see if I get this right, there are Hebrew names found in lists in Egypt of slaves.
Of what?
Slaves.
There are lists of slaves, and there are some definite Hebrew names in there. They're starting to find all these amazing things out there. So, did it get history? Yeah, it did. Okay, I got 5 minutes here. So, here's a good question, right? Who's Jesus? That's the center of Christianity. We should be asking that question. So, who do you think he is? You don't have an infinite number of choices, do you? What are at least some possibilities that we're hearing in our society today? He could be what? Good man. Right? He's just a good teacher. Which is weird, because look at some of the things he said. A good man doesn't say he's God. A good man doesn't say he's going to judge people at the end of time, and if they don't accept him, off they go. Anyway, that is an option. That's what some people will say. What else?
Nuts.
He's what?
Crazy.
Yeah, he's crazy. He thinks he's God. Nobody crazy can say those wonderful things that he said, though. And to attract a following and to have disciples willing to die for a crazy person, that doesn't make any sense.
A political leader, social revolutionary.
Yeah, social revolutionary. Right? He came to turn the Roman Empire upside down. But that's not what he said he was here for.
A denial that he was claiming to be God.
Hey, what?
People usually think too, the opposite, that they denied that he ever was claiming to be God.
Yeah.
Nope, he's just a good guy. He never said he was going to be God.
One other option I've heard people say is he's a legend. That this was something that he lived. They'll give you that. Okay, I think Jesus lived. But they'll say Jesus as God, or Jesus as miracle worker, or Jesus as sayer of all these wonderful things. That was created like 300 years later in the church. Well, that doesn't work either, but we don't have time to get into it. Anyway, so you're kind of stuck. Jesus is Lord. That's probably a place you should end up here. What did he say about himself? I mean, he had some amazing things that he said about himself. That's a question we could ask people. And back to Ted's question, this time, okay, so you're telling me you know something about Jesus. Have you read one of the gospel accounts? It's ancient biography. It's exactly what it is. In fact, maybe that's a better way to talk about it. Instead of saying, would you read the Gospel of Mark? We should probably ask, do you want to read an ancient biography of Jesus by somebody who was there? Because you make a really good argument that the information about Jesus is first century. It's not hundreds of years later. How do you explain the resurrection? That's a key question, isn't it? Again, how many choices do you have? What's one possibility if you don't want to buy into the supernatural? What would you explain? What unusual thing might have happened that day?
They moved the rock and stole the body.
Yeah, the disciples stole the body. Does that make any sense? You're going to steal a body and then you're going to die? No, if the authorities grab you, you're going to say, just kidding, he's over there. Right? Who's going to die for a lie? That makes no sense. And those guys don't look like they were fired up enough to go do that in the first place. They're all panicky and they're hiding and running away. And within a week, they're out proclaiming and they're standing up to the Sanhedrin. They're saying, we won't obey you. We're going to do what God tells us to do. Jesus came back from the dead. What's another possibility? Right? So that's one.
An earthquake.
An earthquake.
But of course, they would have noticed if it happened or not. But
Well, then that doesn't get rid of the body, right? So you're still going to...
He didn't really die, he just faked it.
Yeah, I've heard that one. That it used to be called the swoon theory, that he just kind of collapsed on the cross, and they brought him down, put him in the tomb, it was cool, they wrapped him up. He goes, hey, I feel pretty good. And he goes off to his friends and shows up, and they go, you're the Son of God, you came back from the dead. You know what they really would say? You're one lucky guy, lie down and let us take care of you. They're not going to go out and die for this. So every other theory is just crackpot. It doesn't work at all. I think you're left. And Gary Habermas, Habermas, has done a ton of really good work on this, the resurrection. So anyway, you know what, because of time, we didn't make it all the way through, but that's okay. But every chapter in the book, every chapter in the book brings up things that people will talk to you about, but now you can talk to them. And I can, if you want, I can send the rest of my notes to you. But at the end of the book then, it says, these are the questions you can ask them, depending on what comes up. Evil, pain, and suffering, there's questions we can ask them. Homosexuality, there are questions we can ask. Abortion, questions we can ask. So sorry about the limit on the time here tonight, but I hope you have at least some of these kind of ready to go. And if not, just read through the last few pages there of the book. So Steve is up at this point.
You can leave that on.
You want this?
Well, actually, we have guest speakers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Am I on, Alan?
yeah.
I think you
I
are.
don't hear you yet. You should be. Oh, wait.
He's got to take mute off.
Yep. That's right.
Okay, are we on now? Yeah. Good. Well, we're going to look at what we did at Balboa Park, and I'm going to bring up the participants. That was the topic last week.
Yeah,
that was Dennis Keating. How many heard Dennis Keating
Yeah.
talk on evil and suffering? Wasn't that awesome? To not only hear him talk on that, but to have Dennis come back.
Yeah, these are the questions, if we'd had the time, we could go.
You needed 2 hours. All right, sharing Jesus at Balboa Park. This is an attempt to give you an opportunity to take what you learn and go and try it out with people who are going to disagree with you at Balboa Park. And so what I'd like to do is bring those individuals up, and the idea is, well, before we get the idea what they're going to say, this is the group. All right, we're at a Muslim Easy Up, and we have myself, Esther, BJ, Vinny, Michael, and Alan, who will be coming up and sharing just a little about the experience of being there. Esther and I and BJ with his head down, probably praying for him.
In the name of the other guy?
You got your...
No.
Oh, his name was Islam, right? He called himself Islam. What's your name? Islam. It's like, really? Just Islam? Yeah. I said, so you obviously don't want us to know your name. They asked the question at the atheist booth, is Jesus woke? And you got a chance to vote there. And that's why I'm laughing at the whole idea, how absurd it was. So I asked them just any reflections on the experience and what did you learn? And so number one gets to be BJ. BJ, come on up here.
Okay, I'm gonna use the mic.
Yep.
Thank you. First, I got to tell you, I was a little apprehensive because I've never really tried that before. I believe I'm a somewhat mature Christian, but I've just never really tested myself. And so I went after a couple of, I'll go, and Steve, I just wanted to go see how he does it, what he does. And I went with the intention, I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I'll listen more than I talk and just watch what they do. And it turned out to be an absolutely glorious day. It's a beautiful space. If you've not been to Balboa Park, I highly recommend it. It is beautiful. In fact, I was so taken by it. My wife and I had been there before, but I actually went into one of the museums, the Space Museum, and looked at what a membership would cost. And so I'm toying with that concept because I really like the space, and the architecture is breathtaking. Some of the stuff is just amazing. And it was not only a beautiful day, but it's starting to become spring and it's looking real pretty. There are lots of booths. The Muslim booth was there, an atheist booth was there. There was, I think it was a Mormon or Christian, some Christian faith booth, and other booths, but those were the main people. And then I went over to the atheist booth, or we walked to the end and I came back after going to the Muslim booth, just watching and listening and praying for the guy. No, I was just kidding. No. But I asked that Muslim guy, is he an imam? Is he a leader? But he just said, I'm a regular guy. And it was pretty engaging. I went back to the atheist booth at the end, and it was very strong conversation. He was a pretty good conversationalist, and we had a deep conversation, and Steve and he were pretty involved in the conversation, and there came an opportunity for me to ask, do you believe in the Big Bang? And he goes, yes. And I said, well, then who was the Big Banger? There had to be a Big Banger. And his answer, I don't know. And then I asked, do you believe you have a soul? I mean, do you believe that humans have souls? I don't know. And it was really kind of sad. What it did for me, though, was I'm a boater. I like boating, and I have a degree in oceanography. And if you're in a boat, you've got to tie it off to a dock, and it's got to be tied correctly, or it'll get loose. And if you're out to sea or near the shore and you want to anchor, you've got to drop your anchor, and you've got to do it in a certain way to be sure you stay in place. And what this did for me, spiritually, was it anchored me in the faith I have, and I can now be very secure in approaching others. And it taught me a lot, and I really am glad I went. And I thank you, Steve, for allowing us to do this. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you can give him a round of applause. So now we're going to have Michael share his thoughts.
Well, I want to go back a ways because this was actually my second trip. And the first trip I went was to the Mormon Battalion Historic Site. And it's located in Old Town. And I don't know if you've ever been to, you've probably been to Old Town. If you haven't, it's a nice place to visit. They have all kinds of shops and museums and things like that. So this Mormon Battalion Historic Site is like a museum. It has exhibits, and they have a description of the Mormons coming from Kansas across the desert and things. And it was very interesting. And so at the end, we got a chance to sit down with the Mormon leaders and experts and ask questions about Mormonism and things like that. And it was a very good experience. And one thing to keep in mind, if you're thinking about going, and I hardly recommend going on a trip like this, you don't have to talk at first. You can listen, as BJ was saying. And and also have to mention, whenever you go on a trip like this, you get to have a meal afterwards, and sit down with the friends and enjoy fellowship. So we did that at the Mormon trip, and also at this trip, Balboa Park. At the end, we had a sit-down meal at lunchtime, and it was very good. And so it's a positive experience. If you're thinking you have trepidations, you're thinking, well, I don't know what I would say or what I would do, go for the experience. Just going to Old Town, going to Balboa Park, it's great, like was described. And you don't have to talk. You can listen. I mean, Steve is able to navigate the conversation, and so you can learn. You don't have to be put on the spot or talk that you're not comfortable with. You can just go and do as much or as little as you want. And so I just encourage everyone to think about our next trip, maybe in the fall. I don't know if that'll happen, but it was a super great experience and really glad I went.
Great. And yes, I am thinking about in the fall where we're headed.
When you go, you will be listening to people, and somebody that they're talking to will say something, and then you hit that point where you go, wait a minute, and you're talking. So it's not something you have to push. You can just be natural. One of the things I ran into, Steve's talking with the atheist, and the atheist says, well, that resurrection was mass hallucination. I have a master's in applied psychology. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, wait, whoa. And he starts listing off the cases of mass hallucination. Okay, those cases don't fit the definition of mass hallucination that we normally use. The key is in using the word hallucination. They have other terms for it. But if you're going to argue with an atheist on hallucinations, you're probably going to lose. Steve had the right answer, though he didn't pull it off that day. It's okay, everybody's hallucinating, so where's the body? And this is something you can touch. You have all the stuff that happens afterwards. You have the apostles dying for their beliefs. It just goes on and on and on. These things can't be from hallucination. Also, the times that these people saw Jesus, they were different places, different times, different groups of people. The mass hallucinations we have on record are generally about the same thing, the same place, the same ethnicity, nationality, or whatever of people. And that wasn't the case with Jesus. But trying to argue this point with an atheist, you're really going to have to be up on your psychology, and you're probably not going to make any headway. So Steve's out, where's the body, where's the other stuff? It's the only answer that I see. And it's great fun.
Oh, yeah, it is. Alan's been on a number, he's been on a number of trips. There's another person who's been on a number of trips.
Yep, I'm Vinny. This is my second time down there. Last year, spent most of the time over at the atheist booth, arguing with those people, and it's difficult. They throw up red herrings at you all the time. But this time, I wanted to go over to the Muslim booth, and I toured down the walkway, and then came back and saw the one guy there. We saw him on the screen here. His name was, well, he said his name was Islam. All that. So anyways, I first walked up there. Nobody was with me at the time, and he was talking to one woman. And I kind of thought, what am I going to say here? And I saw Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Jesus were all Muslims on his booth cover. Their definition of Muslim is one who is obedient to God. So in a generic sense, that's how they use that term, but I was going to discuss that real term as used, as we understand it. But he was talking to another woman, and I was listening and not wanting to just cut in. And all this literature was up there, and I saw the one on who Muslims say is Jesus, so I started opening up and reading that, scanning down quick, looking for some bullet points in there, and found a couple. But then I heard him say to the woman, well, Jesus, never really said that he was God. And she said, yeah, I know. And he said, your background is what? And she said, oh, I'm a Catholic by background. And when I heard him say, Jesus never said he was God, and that's when I cut in. I said, wait a minute, that's not right at all. I said, he did, definitely. And then they kind of like, kind of ignored him in a moment. So I just stopped, let them finish their conversation, and she left soon. So then I got to talk to him. I'm not going down with the idea that I'm going to convert this guy or something. That's almost like impossible to do as a task for the day. Instead, my real goal was to get an understanding of where he is as a practicing Muslim, what his mindset is, where he's getting his information from, because I was a little confused. The Quran and what other sources, and they have the Hadith. And I was finding out from that, he said, yeah, the Hadith is Muhammad's sayings, and then other people's sayings too, and they're kind of rated. This is accurate by outside judges. This is accurate. This is what Muhammad probably did say. These things he might have said, and other things he never said, but they're still in that book. And I thought, oh boy, this is a load of information, but why do you have them in the book if he didn't say that and you're going by these things? But, there's just a wealth of material there to jump into with them. But we did talk about who Jesus was. And in that conversation, the group came up there too early on and got into it. And Steve was using an argument about breaking the law one time, running through a stoplight. The police pulls him over and he says, no, I did this 2,000 times. Always stopped at the light, but this time I ran it because I wanted to. Well, that breaks the law. So what happens? You get judged. You have to pay a fine. Where's the justice? And he could not answer where Allah's justice comes in. Their view is learning better was that it's pretty fickle. You try to do what you can with your good works, but you really don't know if you're going to be saved at all. And that was asked by Steve or somebody else that was in that group at that moment. Said, do you know that you would go to heaven? He's like, nope, don't know. And that kind of confirmed what I understood about Muslims in general. They have no assurance. They have to do works, and he was trying to discern the difference between good works, trying to earn heaven, versus good works to please God, to get into heaven. And I kept thinking, it sounds like the same thing to me. But so it was really there as a learning session, and after the others left, and it was just me and him one-on-one for quite a while. And I'm just going through. I got some other more literature there, so I've been reading through some of that already. But I also got a free Quran from him. That I wanted to read. That comes in handy, but to understand where they're getting this understanding from. After all that was done and I was getting tired, it's like, oh, my legs don't work so well anymore. It's like, I gotta move. Went down to the Christian one and talked to them, and those two guys at the Christian booth, both of them had read the Quran too. And they kind of gave me a summary. Yeah, it's this is what it is, and so forth. Well, okay, well. My neighbor is also a non-practicing Islamic culture guy, so I needed really more material to be able to talk with him too. After our lunch, then I went over to the Christian Outreach to Muslims tent. He's out in the big square. I saw him there last year, but he wasn't there when I went up there last year. So I went to talk with him, and I grabbed other information from him that confronts what Muslims believe that's incorrect with who Jesus is and other things. So it gave me success that got to talk with them and work things out. Here's some challenges coming back that helps in the growth, and got lots of literature to further my understanding, so I'm a little better equipped to approach next time, or even my neighbor next door.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a missionary with Wycliffe Bible Translators, and this is the first time that I've done an apologetics trip, but I've been down to Balboa Park to share with people before. And I got into this really great discussion with this Muslim guy, and he was really trying to find out what truth is. It was really bothering him. He really wanted to know, how do I know the truth? And so he said, you're a Christian? I said, yes. And he said, well, how do you know that the Bible's true? So I started going off on some of these different things. Well, it was written over 1,500 years, and it makes sense, and this, all these different things. And he said, so you're convinced that the Bible's true, that you can really know God? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, well, I said, the reason why I don't care for the Quran is that I've read the Quran, part of it. But the reason why I don't care for it is that it doesn't make any sense to me. And I said, it goes all over the place, and it just doesn't make any sense. And he said, well, that's what they tell us about the Bible. It doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, why don't you try it? And so he said, well, if I read the Bible, will you read something? I said, sure. I said, what do you want me to read? And he couldn't come up with anything. He just completely drew a blank. He couldn't come up with anything. So I said, is it okay if I pray for you? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, I'll pray for you. And we broke up that day. So then this time when we went down, then I was thinking about him as we were there. And then we came across Islam, and we were talking with him. And he was talking about what Benny said, that you have to do all these good deeds, and your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, and that's how you go to heaven, and this and that. And I said, well, how do you know for sure? Well, we don't know for sure. We don't have any assurance, is what he was saying. They don't know that they're going to heaven, or they won't. And so they're always doing these good deeds until something happens, right? Until you shame them, dishonor them, until something happens, and now all of a sudden it's a whole different story. So now I got to get even, because I got to restore my honor, right? And then if you do that, the other guy on the other side, he's got to get back at you, because now he's shamed because you hit him back. And it just goes on and on and on, right? And I said, when do you guys ever get to a place where you have peace in your life? And he couldn't answer. And so the passage in the Beatitudes where Jesus is saying, when somebody hits you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. It's for that, I was thinking of that culture, that I've got to get back. If somebody hits me, I got to hit them back. But Jesus said, turn the other cheek. And it was because of that culture where they think that I have to do this in order to be able to restore my honor. And Jesus was addressing that and saying, no, don't do that. Don't go down that road. Forgive, and let and move on, and the Lord will take care of this. Leave it to the Lord. Let him take care of it. We forget how revolutionary the gospel is to people who don't live in it. We've lived in it all of our lives, and we forget how important it is. And so we take our Bibles for granted. And so I work with people who don't have any scripture in their language and don't know any Christians. And so who's going to share it with them? Where are they going to learn it from? And we have to be the ones to do it.
Muslims and Mormons alike don't have assurance of salvation. And I like to use this verse. I write these things, 1 John 5, verse 13, I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, that you may know that you have eternal life. We have the assurance. And I use that with Muslims and with Mormons. Do you have assurance? And they say no. And I use this verse to show that we as Christians do have that assurance. It's a foundation that we can count on, yes.
Are you saying Mormons don't have that assurance?
No.
Oh.
No, they don't have assurance. I've asked them that question. Do you know and this is the way I phrase it, because they believe there's 3 heavens.
Yeah.
So the way I phrase it, do you know you're going to the highest heaven?
Oh.
I don't name it. It's the celestial kingdom, but I don't name it. I just say, do you know you're going to the highest heaven? And they say, no. They don't know. Because to get there, you not only have to believe in Jesus, you have to do all these works to get there. And that's what the book of Galatians, which is why I like Mormons, if we meet long enough, we go through the book of Galatians, because it's all about the Judaizers who added works to grace, and that's against everything we believe. We believe it's grace alone, faith alone, grace alone, in Jesus alone. My conversations, I use those illustrations to expose the fact that God Allah is an unjust judge. And here's what happened. I built up to this point using these illustrations about Jesus. These illustrations point out the gospel. And we built up the point where Jesus pays the price for your sins. And that's how we can be forgiven, because Jesus takes the penalty. And the Muslim said, well, Allah can just forgive. Allah is a merciful. That's the word he used over and over again. Allah is a merciful God. And so I said, okay, if Allah is a merciful God, let me give you another illustration. I said, this gentleman over here, let's just say he murders your wife. I did. That's exactly what I did, Michael. He murders your wife, and he's caught red-handed. There's eyewitnesses. They've got all the instruments that he used on her to kill her with a knife, and he's dead to rights. The judge knows it, but the judge says, well, I'm a merciful judge, and I'm a loving judge, and I'm going to let him go. So I asked him, what do you think of the judge? Well, he tried to go off to a different tangent. He wanted to avoid, and I said, no, let's get back to the judge. The judge just let him go free. He's a merciful judge. What do you think of the judge? Well, he was wrong. Well, if Allah forgives you and is a merciful God, he's wrong. He's an unjust God. Well, it went in one ear and it went out the other. He just continued on. In fact, he gave us a lecture is what he did. We finally got tired of the lecture and had to move on, but that's what he did. He lectured us. But let me ask you this. This is the question I want you, as you've heard these testimonies, and they were wonderful. I'm so thankful that each one came up and shared their experience. But what keeps us from sharing our faith more? It's one word, isn't it? It's one word that keeps us, for the most part. It's the word fear.
Yeah.
It's the word fear. Anybody want to share honestly share why it's scary. Because all of us, including me, you know, I've had to work through the fear, but I had it at the beginning just like anybody else. I still remember talking to Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was literally shaking like this at my door. I was trying to calm myself. I couldn't calm myself down. I was so nervous. What is it? What's one thing that in your heart makes it scary? Alan?
One of them is self-doubt.
Okay, maybe self-doubt.
Unsure.
Okay, unsure. Yes, Bob.
Rejection.
Okay, they're going to reject. Unsure, going to reject.
It's like, you know, when people say, I want to go to church, but I'm not ready to go to church yet. I got to get better. So all of that's exactly why we don't everybody in this room doesn't have their hand up when every time you ask a question. We should all be like this. But we're not ready. We're just not ready right now.
Okay, that's kind of convicting.
Yeah.
That is very convicting that we always think that we need just one more step to get out there, to go to Balboa Park, and I just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
I was going to say, we're afraid we're going to be asked a question. We just don't know the answer, and it's going to be a real simple question.
Okay, so we don't want to look dumb.
Right.
We don't want to look dumb. Yes.
It's sort of kind of same, but like you don't want to say the wrong thing and push that person even further away. Right?
Who are not going to be a good representative for Jesus Christ and say something stupid. I've done them all. Okay, I have said dumb things. So you can join my club. Anything else that you can think of? Yes.
How do I get started in the conversation?
Okay.
How do you do it?
How do you
get the conversation going?
Yes.
How do you bridge the gap?
We also went over to the atheist booth, and I was wondering that same question, how do you get started? And Steve said, we want to talk to people one-on-one, we don't want to talk in a group. And so we all kind of paired off with different ones, and I sat down with this young man. And so it was just kind of small talk, how long have you been here in San Diego, and what do you do, and all of those kinds of things and stuff. And so then I said, so how did you come to be here, meaning here in this atheist booth, what did you do? And so he just started talking from there. He just started talking. People want to talk about themselves, and so just ask them a casual, small talk conversation kind of a question, and they'll start talking. So he started talking, and the first thing he said, I grew up in a Christian home. My parents are Christians. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's so sad. Their hearts are breaking for you right now. And I asked him, have you told your parents that you're an atheist? And he said, no, I don't want to upset them. He said, we have a good relationship. I don't want to upset them. And I thought, they already know.
Yes, BJ.
I just want to say, when we were listening to the guy, the Muslim guy, Steve described him giving us a lecture. And what I perceived when I was listening to him, it was more like a filibuster. It was a meaningless drivel for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
There was no point to what he was saying. It was kind of like, it was a word salad. That's the best way to think about it.
You're right. All right, so the question is, how do we overcome this fear? How did I overcome this fear? And don't think I don't get scared at times, but sometimes I'm just very comfortable. At Balboa Park, I don't know, it's because I've been there a number of times, I was very relaxed because I was at home. But, so how do you overcome the fear? Well, number one, we have the truth. It is easier to defend truth than it is to defend error. You may speak to someone 10 times smarter than you, but you are packing the truth, and I have found that the truth will get to the top of the list or get to the top of the mountain, because they don't have the truth and they're defending error, and it is hard. It is really hard to defend error. So we have the truth. Another way to overcome the fear is just to do it. It's like the Nike thing. Just do it. Is a lot of them, like BJ said, you know, you don't have to, or Michael also said, you don't have to say anything. Just hang out there and listen to some of us get into conversations and maybe interject something. When I told Esther we should all go one-on-one, I said, I'll take their top guy. Let me have their best guy, because I know who he is. He started that group, and I'm used to talking to these guys, so let me take him. So I took him. Then BJ came around and was listening, and then he started interjecting stuff. And it was fascinating. Yeah, it was easy for him to interject stuff. And this is a step in the right direction to just get it started. Find a starting place. I have been in hundreds of conversations, either email or one-on-one, and it just happens that over time you will get better at it. Of course, being here, I'm so thankful you are here, and we're back in the fall. You need to come back. This is a good place to learn and to start to develop the knowledge so that, you know, we can overcome that hill that says, I just need one more piece. You're getting the piece. You can go, and I've been thinking through, I'd like to teach on it at least a couple weeks on Mormonism, and then go to the Mormon Brigade. That's a pretty relaxed atmosphere to go. Yes?
If you're afraid of talking in public, maybe start at a friendly place, like the Welcome Center here. You know what I mean? You're fed with a script. This is Emmanuel Faith. We've been here 86 years. You get to learn how to pattern to speak to people. It takes away that anxiety. Do it in a friendly place where you're surrounded by all the stuff, so nobody's unclear of who you are, but at least you get rid of that anxiety of approaching strangers, so that when you go into a hostile area, that anxiety has come down because you've done it so many times.
Yes, and a couple more things and then I'll wrap up here. But of course, nothing takes the place of study. You need to read good books. We've given you resources, especially Gary. Gary loves to give resources, and they're all great. It's all great stuff. We both have read most of those books and more. So we need to study, and you can listen to podcasts. I do a lot of listening to podcasts by different Christian speakers. Greg Kokel of Stand to Reason. My favorites. Greg Kokel of Stand to Reason and Frank Turek out of North Carolina. Those are my two favorites that I listen to every week. I listen to it, and a lot of times I hear the same things over and over and over, and you know what? They finally sink in. It takes the repeating of truths for me to finally get it, and then it shows up in my talk with a Muslim or with an atheist. Where did that come from? Well, it came from listening to those guys get into conversations. So that's the thing. It's part of it is just getting past that fear stage and just coming to watch and listen and just be part of it. We talked about lunch. Well, there's the crew at lunch. We always finish with a lunch, and we get a chance to debrief how, the experience and that sort of thing. So I'll figure out where we're going to go next time in the fall, and would love to have you step up and say, I'm going this time. Let's pray.